Hello, witches. You're here today with us. Welcome to Peaceout Witches. I'm Stacy,
And I'm Jamie.
and we're excited to guide you through this week's episode. We're going to be diving into a rich history and sacred practices of red tints. We're going to answer the question of what are they, why are they powerful, and how they can support modern women in reconnecting with their divine feminine energy.
That's right. The concept of red tents is rooted in ancient traditions where women once gathered in sacred spaces to rest and connect and honor their cycles of their body, but also the cycles of their lives too. And these gatherings weren't just about menstruation, they were about wisdom and storytelling, healing, music, medicine, spiritual renewal. There were so many components to it that have been lost with time.
So give yourself a moment, light a candle, and let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Before we begin, we always like to take a moment of a sacred pause. So if you can just take a deep breath wherever you are and exhale slowly and let yourself just arrive in this moment. Close your eyes if you can and imagine yourself stepping into the sacred tent, woven with the wisdom of generations of women before you, and feel the warmth of the fire, the scent of the herbs in the air, and the comfort presence of sisterhood surrounding you.
And with your next inhale, welcome in the ancient knowledge of women's circles, those who have gathered under the moon and shared stories and sat together to reclaim their own power. And as we move through today's episode, let's set an intention to reconnect with that sacred space that nourishes us.
And as you breathe in, and when you feel ready, just gently open your eyes and let's begin. So, what is a red tent?
The red tent is a sacred space where women come together to honor their cycles. They would often sit in circle and share their wisdom. The older generations would share stories, especially at that time that they actually had red tents. They were sharing the stories about things that they went through, whether they were good or they were hardships, but they always had some kind of meaning and wisdom behind them for the younger generations to glean and learn from so that they can carry on traditions. And it was definitely a moment for them to have rest, renewal, deep connection. It was just something that set women of that time apart from having to just be a mother or having to be a wife or having to be a laborer. She had that moment to be a woman, connecting with other women.
Well, and this was often done when women were bleeding. It was to serve a much broader purpose, because when women were gathering together and they would be nurturing each other and they would be celebrating things to each with each other and holding space for emotional healing, for processing, this was really a time for women to just reclaim that rest and that renewal, to have a deep connection to the earth and to each other and really just being able to be present with themselves in time of bleeding.
Mhm.
And
And go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
I was just thinking that it's like a lost magical rite of passage too.
Uh-huh.
There's also ceremony behind it, and they would use these gatherings for certain ceremonies during the year. There were only women inclined or for women only. And I feel like the times of our lives right now, we're coming back to that and really rooting back into the reclaiming of our sovereignty as women. And also, not in the sense that we're, I am woman, hear me roar, but more like I am a woman who wants to connect with other women and have a sacred space to share stories or share like experiences. We get so isolated in motherhood and in other aspects and journeys of our life as women that we don't have that connection. And there's often been this sense of pitting women against each other in movies or in, media that has perpetuated over the decades, that's kind of driven us further and further apart. And I think this is like this reclamation time, this rejuvenation. We are becoming more aware that that is happening. And now we're more apt to reclaim our sisters and reclaim that time that we didn't have with them in circle and intent and celebration.
Well, and I think that's an important part of, how red tents have changed and how we have brought them forward, not only Jamie in our own work, but out in the world today, how many people are maybe experiencing them, seeing them, hearing about them, reading about them. There is this modern aspect of providing a sisterhood and a non-judgmental space. And how is that different in Sacred Circle than in Red Tent? Sacred Circle is really a space where you're building upon your inner magic, and Red Tent is really a space where you are sharing about the woes and the beauty of being a woman. So, oftentimes we will share experiences of menarche, of our first period, or we will share experiences maybe. Of having our periods, of things that have happened over that time period, or maybe, you know, times we didn't feel loved or respected during that time. And then we often will use them now as a space for women to be able to carry forth and share their birth story. And so I think that that's an important part of the Red Tent movement right now is this aspect of really honoring birth and honoring women being able to share their birth story and share it in a space that is not judgmental and share it in a space that's sacred and share it in a space where it's really protected and safe because not everybody's birth story was
Mhm.
safe. Not everybody's birth story is beautiful. Some people had a very traumatic birth story, and the red tent is meant to have that broader purpose of bringing in women and allowing them to hold the feminine energy in a spiritual way to be able to support sisterhood and this flow that we all create within us that happens to end in red, right? In blood. And so the red tent is often red. We'll have all kinds of red things that go with it. So let's talk a little bit though before we go too much further. I want to talk a little bit about just the history and the myths that come along with red tents. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Talked about how we in history that the red tent existed in various forms, and it's definitely talked about in different mythologies and in different ways too. And biblically the red tent, this is actually coming from an author called her book is called The Red Tent, and it's by Anita Diamond. She brought attention to the idea that the Hebrew women had their own sacred space for rest and communion during their cycles. Can you imagine that honoring of your sacred cycle in sacred space with other women? I think that's just amazing. But I think that that's definitely given us in this modern time the carte blanche to take time and learn our cycles and know when we're supposed to retreat and when we're supposed to have energy and move forward. But and then other ancient cultures also talk about this. Egyptian, Native American, Celtic, and European societies, there were moon lodges, there were women's huts, there were women gathered during their bleeding time, during pregnancy, right after giving birth. It was just a very honoring time for women and a space that they carved out in their time to honor each other and themselves.
Well, and we can also look at certain cultures where, blood is not considered sacred. And then we can look at certain cultures where blood is considered sacred. And we know that many of the ancient cultures considered blood to be sacred, and the newness and renewal of a woman's blood was sacred. So many times women would walk the farm or the garden, and they would, bleed on the garden and allow that nutrients to come back into the earth and to provide for their food. And so there is all of these pieces of, even moon bathing or women going out and being able to bleed with the earth or women being able to even experience their blood and talk about it as this aspect of, myth. And really, we know now that historically, there was many sacred rituals and rites that were around these red tents, these moon lodges, and these places for women to be able to support other women during all of the different cycles of our life.
Mhm. And it became like a spiritual practice for them. It was a spiritual connection because women menstruating in history were always thought of as spiritual beings, portals to between worlds, or that they had heightened intuition during their menstruation, or they received visions or guidance or healing. And actually, in my own personal way, I have experienced that during the time that I was bleeding or shedding. I was relieved of my burdens in a sense and shedding and going quieter and learning that my intuition was very much heightened during that time. And actually, also opposite of that, when I ovulated, I also had heightened awareness too in different ways, just different types of intuition. But it's just this beautiful practice from our history that would allow women to gather and allow them to have time with each other. I mean, how often do we get time with each other other than maybe a play date or something that is involved with, if you're a mother, it's usually related to your children.
Uh-huh.
Or if you have a girls' night, it's out partying, dancing, drinking, whatever it is that you do with your girls. But it's not usually this sacred moment. But at Peace Not Perfection, we do cultivate the community for this sacred moment being where you have your girls' night and how important that could be for some people who are really missing that in their life. I know I was personally and didn't even know it. And when I
Well, and
experienced it the first time, it was like, oh my gosh, I missed this my whole life.
I think that was a big part for me is that I was experiencing girls' nights and girls' weekends, but
Yeah.
I wasn't feeling fulfilled from those girls' nights and girls' weekends like I was when I was, say, going to retreat or women's circle or red tent and being able to have the sacredness and the ritual of being able to be held in a space of sisterhood and women. And so, one of the things we do at at Peace Not Perfection Academy is we run a red tent every few months. We usually do it on the fifth Tuesday of the month just because it's kind of like the fifth week and it's an easy time for us to be able to run it. So we try to do it seasonally every 3 months. And we have a red tent, and this is really a time for women to come and explore, be vulnerable, feel supported, and show up fully for themselves and being able
Mhm.
to reflect in their own sacred feminine rhythms and the cycles of birth, death, and rebirth. So we often will have a theme for the red tent. We will share stories, and it's just really a sacred time to be able to honor and love on each other and support each other in this space in the online community. And through Peace Not Perfection, we also provide training on red tents. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is, how to put on a red tent. It is something that, just about any woman can put on. You don't need to have a special fancy red tent, although we sometimes do if we're doing them in person.
Mhm.
And it can be a really just beautiful way to introduce women, sisters, friends to the sacredness of circle without it feeling so like witchy or so like coven oriented. It can feel real just like
A gathering.
wholesome. Yeah, like
Yeah.
wholesome, like a gathering because
Mhm.
you're coming and you have like a story in mind. Like we're gonna come and we're all gonna share our first, menarche, or we're gonna share a funny story from our period, or we're gonna
Mhm.
share a story when someone supported us in our, growth as a woman. And
Mhm.
it just provides a gentle opening for us to begin to have less resistance towards the discomfort that sisterhood can bring in the beginning.
That's true. And it just brings in your community too. So if you just decide after hearing this podcast, and we totally recommend going with your first instincts to set a circle and make it a red tent, you can call it a red tent, but it does not even have to be in a tent. It just needs to be in a warm, cozy, sacred space. So like logistically, make sure that where you have your red tent if you do it in person, it's just cozy. You've set it up with nice colors that resonate with you, pink, red, white. I like purple. And then bring in the candles and bring in your personal wants for this circle, because if you're creating it for other people, then you just bring that in. So if you have a theme and you're bringing in, so for instance, motherhood or menstruation, you could bring in some goddesses that represent some of those things. Or if you're just doing a beauty way type of red tent where you just want to honor the beauty in each woman who attends, then you could bring in some goddesses there and do a little lesson on it, but also you can share and gather. And as a host, you kind of will initiate the conversation and kind of guide it without allowing it to be too structured, because it'd be nice for people to have what they have to say. And usually to get to the stories, some of us just need more time to speak and have just words, period. And then having that vulnerable moment and then feeling like we're safe. Okay, now I'm ready to share. Now I would like to share this birth story, or I would share this traumatic experience during my period, or whatever it is.
You can do this anywhere. You don't need to have it in a tent or, any somewhere specific. It's great to be able to do, like, I know that when I had young babies, we had a cloth diaper store, and we would all often go to the cloth diaper store, and they had like a little yoga room, and we would do red
Babies and
tents out of
doula.
the yoga room. And it was a great opportunity to bring women in to nurture the community and to be able to do different things that were at that time nurturing women who were also cloth diapering their babies. So we would often do that event as sharing your birth story, and then we would also have ones of sharing like your nursing story. One of the things I would always do is I would put like a red piece of fabric in the middle and I would put some red roses on there. And I usually will put some kind of crystal. I love quartz. Um, and that just designates a sacred area and kind of lets the women know that this is like a little bit more of a sacred experience. And it can evoke like warmth and grounding. And you can think about anything within your ceremony that you'd like to do that is going to call in the feminine power, that's going to make the women feel grounded. I love to incorporate, healing practices when possible. When I first started doing red tents, I would usually incorporate just some kind of like opening, some kind of closing, and then really it would just be about women sharing their story, about each of the women at that circle sharing the story of the topic of whatever was going on. And that really was long enough. We
Mhm.
didn't really have to add a whole lot more. And partly that was really because I was working with women who had newborn babies. So I think that that brings us to the point of knowing your audience. If you're having a bunch of nursing moms come in, you don't want to have a 6 hour red tent. You want to have like a 2 hour red tent. If you've
Mhm.
got uh, a bunch of maidens coming in, a bunch of women who are not necessarily having babies, or maybe they're beyond their babies, like their babies are a little bit older and they can get away from their babies. Those are the kinds of things where you can start to do like 4 to 5 hour kind of events. But you do want to know your audience.
Mhm. I agree. And just incorporate yourself into it. So bring your flair, your personality, your spirituality, and you can theme it around spirituality too if you wanted to. If you wanted to do a Mary Magdalene red tent, or if you want to do something that just follows in line with your belief system, you will bring in those women who are like-minded. I think it's a great way to build your community, especially if you move into a new neighborhood or a new area and you want to find like-minded people and you want new friends. This is a great way to do that. And then there is a possibility of creating a business behind this and actually providing this as a service. So, and that's what we teach here at Peace Not Perfection Academy. We have two paths in our programs that you can go along with. One will teach you how to do it, and the other will actually bring you red tents so you can have the experience if you've never had it. And then
Uh-huh.
you can also just follow along with us on our website, go to our events page, and then sign up for a red tent if it's something that you would like to experience and have always had an interest in. Just do that. You can go through that way as well.
And I think, that it's really, we're living in a time period where a lot of women are waking up to wanting to support their daughters and wanting to support themselves and wanting to feel empowered, and wanting to have a sisterhood and a community to be able to do that.
Mhm.
And, the very first time that I ended up in a red tent, it wasn't a red tent that I provided, it was a red tent that somebody else provided. And I showed up ready to share my birth story, not realizing that what I was going to be leaving with was a powerful understanding of who I was. a little bit more connected to my ancestors, a little bit more connected to my sisters, a little bit more connected to the fact that motherhood could be honored. It could be valued. It could be something that should be ritualized around or um, looked at as sacred. And at that time, we're talking 15, 20 years ago, um, that didn't feel sacred. It didn't feel like something that was an option. It didn't feel, what felt sacred was you're supposed to do this, this, and this. There was this, way that we were supposed to go about doing things. And the red tent for me just kind of threw me on a different path. It
Hmm.
showed me a different way. It gave me an opportunity to understand that there was value. Not that I didn't have value in people's stories before, but there was value in sitting with these women and hearing them and seeing them. And then to be seen and heard myself, to be seen and heard when I had a young baby and I had been out of the house in 6 months and my house was a mess and my boobs were a mess and my hair was crazy. And here I was sitting with a group of women who were loving me and honoring the journey that we were all on together. And even though it was each of our own individual journeys, it didn't feel so alone anymore. And that is what the red tent is about. It's about that sacred sisterhood.
Yes, and you nailed it with the not feeling so alone and feeling seen and heard, but also learning to see and hear because
Yes.
we are sometimes so isolated and programmed to be so distrusting of other women that we never hear or see them because we have prejudgment and our brain will shut down and won't allow us to just fully see the beautiful human that they are and embrace who they are and actually see the reflection of yourself in them. And that's what changed for me when I went to my very first red tent ceremony and I was pregnant with my daughter. And so that was many moons ago, but she during that time and who I arrived with and the person I went with and also the group of women that were there, I was terrified because I had a female wound. Or how do you say that?
Yeah, I was
I had
terrified
the
too,
mother
for
wound.
sure.
I had
Yeah.
the mother wound, of my mom and my sister, I had the wound. And so I had always had best friends who were males, and it was just like a pattern. Okay. And so I went into this event with a friend, a female friend, and I came out signing up for a whole year. I wanted a whole year of this. And it transformed me, and I was able to then stop and see the person in front of me, the female and the male, but really the person in front of me, it doesn't matter what gender they were, and then hear them, see them. It made me a better healer. It gave me the opportunity to have more grace for myself and my quirkiness and all the things inside of me that I had judged so harshly because of my trauma. It allowed me to like soften that and just know that, we're all here having this experience. And when we can come together in a red tent with all these beautiful stories and all these beautiful women who have different things to share, you just realize that there's a commonality there. We are connected. You see the connections through our stories. We all share similar stories or the vulnerability or something. You could find something. And then the heart wall that we built around us
Hmm.
starts to crumble. So there's so many healing. It's actually just so healing. And it gave me a lot of courage to do something more with my life than live in my tiny little quiet bubble and come out and step out into my life more.
Well, and I think that that's sometimes what we don't realize is that, these red tents are really an idea. And, they come from an ancient idea of women celebrating women, of
Mhm.
honoring the portal of the period, of honoring the portal that we flow every month. And we should be resting. We should be spending time, quality time, resting every month. And
Mhm. Bless you and bless you.
oftentimes, when we're working or when we are, in this world of the masculine, really, We are not given time on a monthly basis to honor ourselves or honor each other. And I think many of us come with that same sisterhood wound, Jamie, and motherhood wound that you kind of, shared
Hmm.
about. I remember showing up to my first tent too and being like, what is this going to be? Like, what's it going to be like? Especially with a bunch of cloth diapering moms, you just never know what you're going to get. Um,
Hmm.
but I think if anything, that cloth diapering journey and that red tent healed my idea of not knowing what I was going to get when it came to women, right? Because in teaching me how to be seen and heard, like you said, it also taught me how to see and to hear. So
Hmm.
it is a deep power that we have to offer women and offer each other in spaces of sacredness. In non-judgment and in really just a space to be able to share those stories. Like I remember when I got married and all I could talk about was weddings. And I remember when I had a baby and all I could talk about was pregnancy. Like the red tent is that opportunity for us to kind of go back to those spaces and be heard again and be able to share all the knowledge that we learned during those times that we forget to share because we're no longer in the space of pregnancy or we're no longer in the space of weddings or we're no longer in the space of that, right? Because we've grown. And so that doesn't consume us any longer. But this allows, I think, all generations to be able to come together and share the wealth of knowledge with each other in a way that calls in the divine feminine. And you can make it really beautiful. You can make it really red and really amazing or you can make it really simple and just bring some red food and have some red roses.
Hmm.
The most important part is the sacredness that the sisterhood brings and just having that safe space, I think, for us to be heard. Sometimes we think about like this Me Too movement that we all kind of just went through. The red tent is an aspect of being able to see and hear and know me too.
Hmm. Of
Me
all
too.
things, on all
Yeah,
things.
I'm
Yeah.
not alone. I'm not alone. So before we go, let's close with a small ritual. You can honor your sacred feminine energy, light a candle, place your hands on your heart, and you can repeat after me if you'd like to. I honor my body as sacred.
Body is sacred.
I welcome rest, renewal, and connection.
Rest, renewal, and connection.
And I embrace the wisdom of my ancestors and the
Sister
women before me.
and the women before me.
If today's conversation inspired you, we invite you to join us in Lunar Alchemy for Moon Magic, Sacred Sisterhood, and Deep Transformation. And for those of you who feel called to go even further and want to learn how to put on red tents yourself, Path to Priestess opens for enrollment every 3 months. This is where we train women in holding sacred spaces like red tents and sacred sisterhood circles and all kinds of different things. So if you're getting excited and you want to learn more, please check out our website or comment below.
Mhm. And we are here, real humans, here to help you in any way we can. So drop a comment if you're watching this on YouTube or go to our website and reach out. We have a lot of events coming up, some free. And so we would love to see you there. We are calling in our tribe and we are hoping you're doing the same. And we hope to see you on the next episode.
We believe in your inner magic. Peace out, witches.
Peace out.